You going to sit still? You sit there, Lola. Sit there. Good girl. You can't get down. Otherwise you'll be off into next door's garden. Hello. I thought I'd talk to you today about how I got into the whole filmmaking business right from the start. I've been filmmaking now for about, I don't know, since I was in my early teens, I suppose. And I've been using things like Super 8, Standard 8, 16mm. Then I got onto the early video and the analog video stuff, VHS, and then now, you know, various different digital formats, and I'm mucking about in that sort of way, a whole different stuff from my own projects and corporate video projects and all that sort of stuff. But it all started back, as I say, when I was in my early teens. I used to live on in a cul-de-sac, and you've got to stay here, Lola, because you can't go running off. Okay, you stay here, stay, good girl. And in this cul-de-sac, on the back of the cul-de-sac, it ran onto an old farm. Well, the farm still had the farm buildings and the farm land, but unfortunately it had been abandoned. Well, I say unfortunately, it was a kid's paradise, because me and my mates would nip over there and muck about and all that sort of stuff. The fields were just sort of left to go fallow and do whatever they do. They went wild. And then we would go around the old farmhouse and the stables and the various buildings that was all empty, and just play. And it was great fun, build camps and all that sort of stuff. And then one day my friend came round and we said, let's go down the farm. We were heading off down the farm on this old unmetalled road that led down at the back of my house down to this farm and all these fields. And we saw this car, I think it was a Ford Cortina. Anyway, a Ford Capri, I think it was actually, when I think about it. Anyway, there we were. And we saw this car slowly driving down. Then suddenly it stopped and the two doors leapt open, and out of the two doors, these two gents, these two blokes came out, rolled onto the ground and were pointing at the farmhouse. Well, we couldn't quite work out why they were doing that, and so we ducked down into the long grass and watched them. Well, after a few minutes, they got up, they got back into the car, and they reversed back down the path, this unmetalled road, stopped, waited a few minutes, then slowly drove up to the farm, opened both doors, leapt out, rolled onto the ground, and were pointing again. And we looked at them and we thought, what are they? No, they're not pointing, they've got guns. So we were a little bit perturbed by this, because they'd leapt out and they were, you know, they were dressed in jeans and t-shirts and denim jackets and that kind of stuff. We thought, hello, they're gangsters. Wonder what's going off down at the farm. But then they got out, they got up, they got back into the car, the car reversed up again, another sort of 50 yards or so, and then they did the same thing all over again. They drove down, opened the doors, rolled out onto the ground and pointed their guns. And then they did that several times. We were creeping nearer. I mean, you know, we were in our, I don't know, what, 13, something like 14, something like that. Well, turns out, of course, they got up and then they slowly sauntered in, and we realised they were making a film. There was a camera, we sort of spotted the camera on its tripod, and so we crept up. We didn't want to interrupt and be seen. No, stay here, Lola, stay, good girl, stay. And so we crept up and watched them. Well, later on, they'd done that scene, whatever that was, and the next thing they did was they were chasing somebody around, climbed up onto the roof and were shooting at each other with blanks. By now we weren't scared, we were fascinated, and they carried on doing this for a bit. They got onto the roof and were shooting and were rolling off, and then one rolled down. They put some cardboard boxes down, and one of them was shot and was wounded and rolled off the roof, off a stable roof, onto these cardboard boxes. And then they did various other things, and then eventually it seemed to us, they set fire to one of the barns. We saw all this smoke and flames coming out, and then this girl ran out, who we think had been kidnapped, and she was on fire. And she ran out past the camera. Someone put blankets round her. So we got this. By now we were brave, and we'd sneaked up, and we were just watching from afar. We didn't speak to them because we were only kids, but we just stood and watched behind the camera. And we saw that they were using some petroleum jelly to set fire to the windowsills, and then a smoke machine to pour smoke out of the thing. And it was very impressive and remarkable. And then someone was falling out of a roof, a top window in one of the a second story up, and again he fell onto these cardboard boxes and mattresses that were set up. And we just thought this was amazing. So we watched the whole bit of the filming until at last, oh, go on then, but you better not go far, Lola, because you'll go into next door's garden. Until at last they packed up and then they went home. And so when they went home, we sneaked up and looked at all the stuff, and we climbed up onto the roof, and we rolled down, set up the boxes, and fell onto the mattresses and the boxes. And then we said, hey, we should make our own film. Well, at the time, I must have been younger than that, because at the time I borrowed my dad's camera. He had a ordinary standard SLR, not like these digital SLRs that you get now. It didn't do movies or anything like that. It was just a stills picture. And we put in a roll of transparencies, the old stuff that you would get the slides for slideshows. And we just did a series of stills, basically retelling the story that we'd seen already. So one of us we called it Mini Pete's first job, and I took most of the pictures. And Mini Pete climbed up onto the roof, and we set up all the stuff and all the mattresses and all this sort of palaver, and he was shot by somebody else, and he went rolling down, and we recreated it. What we couldn't recreate was the smoke and the fire, of course, because we weren't allowed any of that. But that was the thing that had me. No, Lola, come back, come here. She's not going. Lola. She's not going to obey me. She's in. Come here. Come on. Come on. Good girl. The fence, you can't see it, but the fence has come down over there, and unfortunately Lola will go in it. So she's actually got a smaller area. So this area is a bit overgrown and what have you, and she's not really supposed to be up here because she can get through different fences. Anyway, my point is that I was bitten by the bug at that moment, and the next thing I had to do was to save up money to buy a cine camera. And once I had that cine camera, and in those days, for those people who don't remember cine film, you got 3 minutes and 20 seconds on Super 8. And it was a tiny, tiny, very thin, almost like bootlaces sort of film. It was half of 16mm. And the quality was variable depending on the camera and the lenses that you had. But it was fantastic. You'd go out, you'd squirt your film, just, you got 3 minutes 20. So you were meticulous about what you shot. You didn't just shoot anything and everything. You'd work out your story, you'd shoot a few seconds of this, few seconds of that, few seconds of that. And then once your roll of film is set up, full up, you'd send it off to Kodak at Hemel Hempstead, and you'd have to wait about a week for it to come back. And then when it came back, you'd be so excited. You'd set up the projector and maybe the screen, and then I think she's gone next door. Sorry, now Harriet is calling me. I'm just filming, Harriet.
Sorry.
That's all right, but I think she's crawled through the thing. I've had to take her. She's next door, that next door. And so, you could just get bitten by the bug, and you absolutely think that this was amazing. And then you'd blow it up onto the big screen, and some of it was overexposed, some of it was underexposed, some of it was all at the wrong angle, some of it was out of focus, and you slowly learn. But you learned because it was so expensive, and you had such a limited amount of film. And then, in order to edit the film, you would have to literally cut it with a pair of scissors or a small little device called a splicer, and stick it back together with either acetone glue, which would glue the bits of film on top of each other at the edges, or by tape. I preferred the acetone glue. You would grind a bit of the celluloid down and stick the two together, and then you'd make your film. You'd edit it that way. It was a long-winded way. Sound was a right old problem. You could get something called stripe, which would go down the edge of the film in the old days. Very difficult to record on it. It was no more than just a dribble of magnetic tape that they put on. But you had to, once you've done your film, you sent it off to get that done. So it was a complete, it was such a palaver. Whereas now, you know, now kids can go out there with these phones and just shoot stuff for hours of it, load it up to YouTube or wherever. I mean, nobody wanted to go and see your films back in the day. You'd have these films. It was hard enough to get your mum or your dad or your sister to come and watch what you'd made, let alone the millions of people who view the YouTube clips these days. Oh my, it just, you know, shocking really. But hey, you know, but I think that whole process of the old-fashioned way, and I know people say, oh, you're harking back to history, but there's something about the very early development of film and that process of film which gets into you in the root, and you then take forward into everything I do. I still am conscious about how much I film, how I edit it. I mean, very often, to save the editing, you'd edit in camera. You'd film this first bit here, then you'd film that bit, then you'd film back to there. You go, oh, I need a wide shot, film that. And you'd edit in order, in camera, so that when you play the film, it was already edited. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But anyway, that's how I got into the filmmaking process, and I've never looked back really. I love the telling of stories using a camera. So join me again. Don't forget to subscribe if you've enjoyed my little videos, and I'll tell you more about my filmmaking exploits as well as all the other bits and bobs that I do. Give me a big thumbs up, and I'll see you on the next one.